Hello, my name is Grant Echohawk. What we will be discussing today is ways to prepare your finances, whether it be for your personal finances or business finances. This presentation is part of a cooperation between Tongass Federal Credit Union, Spruce Root, and the Commons at TFCU. So briefly, I want to talk about the different organizations that I just mentioned. Tongass Federal Credit Union is a not-for-profit credit union that services all of Southeast Alaska. In addition, TFCU is designated as a Community Development Financial Institution, which is a special designation for financial institutions that give extra support to our traditionally underrepresented communities throughout the nation. As well, we also partner with Spruce Root, and Spruce Root also serves Southeast Alaska, is also a CDFI, but Spruce Root is designated as a native CDFI, and between the two organizations, they've developed a wide suite of products and services to serve not only the personal needs, but as well the business needs here in Southeast Alaska. And that's where I come in. What I do is I'm able to access all of the products and services of both entities and provide support in not only financial wellness, business development, and general business support for anybody within Southeast Alaska. And where you can find me is at the Commons at TFCU. I'm right behind the Pilot House. Now, if you'd like to reach out to either Tongass Federal Credit Union or Spruce Root, you can contact them at tongassfcu.com or spruceroot.org. And where you can find me is at the Commons at TFCU. I have one of the offices just beyond the coffee shop. And one of the things that we're going to be discussing today is credit and debt, but more importantly, how to use both credit and debt as a tool. So, as you all know, credit means that you can basically borrow money to purchase something that you would like now, not have to wait later to either whether it be a product or a service, not wait till later to acquire it. So it is a really important tool within your financial wellness, as long as you keep in mind that whatever you purchase now on credit, there will be interest applied, and I'll go over what that looks like further down the presentation. So before we get too far into the presentation, I do want to cover general terms that I'll be discussing. You'll hear me speak about a credit report, a credit history, and a credit score. Now, a credit report is your overall credit history from the first time you open up an account up until whenever you pull your credit report. So it's a snapshot of your credit history. And a credit score is also a snapshot of your credit history, but a score is assigned to it. And I'll go over what that scoring looks like further in the presentation. Some other common terms I'll be talking about are the different types of credit people can acquire. The most common are going to be credit cards or retail cards. That includes Visa, MasterCard, and other retail outlets that have cards. There are installment loans, and most people are familiar with those through the vehicles that you purchase, whether it be a vessel or a car or a truck or even ATVs. Those are often installment loans. Another option that is a little less common is called a line of credit. Of lines of credit, probably one of the most common is a home equity line of credit. And what that does is it allows someone to borrow against the equity in their home, and what they can do is pay it back and borrow again up to a certain time period. And then last is, as most people are familiar with, is a home mortgage that's often referred to as a home loan. So when it comes to credit and debt, there's a couple of key things you want to make sure that you keep in mind. First is you always want to know who exactly you owe. You always want to know how much you owe. You'll want to know when your payments are due, and you'll also want to know how much your payments are going to be every month. So one thing to keep in mind is that whenever you use credit, that means you are taking on debt. And generally, that means that whatever you purchase, whether it be a product or service, is going to be a little bit more expensive due to interest. And that's really the goal of this presentation, is to help you get the best possible terms whenever you have to take on debt. So when you're taking on debt, one of the first rules of thumb is you have to ask yourself, is it a need or a want? And in general, you only want to take on debt when it is a legitimate need. So whenever you're considering debt, have that be your first question. Is this something I absolutely need, or is it something that I want? If it's something that you want, then it's usually recommended to save up a little and purchase it when you have enough saved. Another thing to consider is whatever you're purchasing on debt is if it's going to take you longer to pay it off than you're actually going to get use out of it. So there's lots of products out there that you can get on credit, but you'll end up paying longer for it than you actually are able to use it. And that's generally not a good position to be in. The last two things to consider are how much will you end up paying for that product or service in the long run, and we'll give you some tools to help you to see that later in the presentation. And then lastly is how will that monthly payment impact your personal finances? As I mentioned, one of the things to consider is the long-term impact when you do purchase something on credit. Your interest rate is going to impact how much you're going to pay in the long run, and as well it's going to impact your minimum payment. As a consumer, your financial institution will provide you with a truth in lending statement that gives you a lot of that information. So I strongly urge you to take a look at it when it's presented to you. What a truth in lending statement does is it provides you critical information about the loan that you're taking on. So it's going to give you your annual percentage rate, or APR. It's going to show you the amount that you are financing. It's also going to show you what your total interest charges are going to be over the duration of the loan, assuming you make the minimum payments, and what the final cost to you is going to be once you've paid off that loan. There's one other piece of financing that I do want to talk about before I go into actual credit reports and credit scores. This one is called being credit invisible. Now, I've run into this in several instances where somebody does not have the credit history that would allow them to take on debt, and that can impact, as I mentioned earlier, their ability to buy a home, their ability to buy a vehicle, their ability to buy a vessel. So the term for that is generally credit invisible. We do see that often with folks that are just turning 18, but also for somebody that has chosen to either avoid credit or work with cash only throughout much of their career in just managing their personal finances. And as I mentioned, I work with a lot of business clients. And I have found that being credit invisible at the beginning of the lending process can also pose its own challenges. So again, throughout this presentation, we're going to show you some tools to be able to use credit and manage your debt in a way that is good for you, but also good for any business ventures that you want to pursue in the future. So when you do apply for a loan, whether it be a personal loan or a business loan, your financial institution is going to generally pull your credit report. And as I mentioned prior, your credit report is a snapshot of your overall credit history on the day it is pulled. Now, financial institutions will pull your credit report from one of three credit reporting bureaus. Those three bureaus are Equifax, TransUnion, and Experian. Now, one thing to keep in mind is that as a consumer, you are entitled by federal law to be able to get a free copy of your credit report once every 12 months. There are several advantages of doing this. Not only do you get to see what's on your credit report, which is also always a good thing to review, but also there are instances where occasionally mistakes are made. Human error or even software errors can lead to errors on your credit file. Personally, I've had to dispute items on my credit file probably about 5 times so far in my life. And as a matter of fact, I actually recently went through a dispute that was corrected, and it took about 3 weeks to complete. There are several places to go get your credit report. The two that I would recommend are either by going directly through the credit bureaus themselves. Now, if you do that, it takes a little bit longer because you generally have to go to each one. Some of them will allow you to access the others, but the one that I use is annualcreditreport.com. Now, annualcreditreport.com is an online service that allows you to access your credit report like many others that are out there. The difference between this one and others is that annualcreditreport.com is approved and endorsed by the Federal Trade Commission. And as I've mentioned, that's the one that I use. So when I go out and get my credit report, I go to annualcreditreport.com. It asks me some basic information, and it gives me all three of my credit reports without a lot of frills or without trying to upsell me on other products or services. When you do pull your credit report, not only is it going to give you your personal information, any debts that you carry, your payment history, how long you've had them, and the balances on them, but it's also going to give you your credit score. Now, the credit score is generally the first thing that a financial institution or creditor is going to look at. The 3-digit credit score is a number assigned to you based on your overall credit history. And generally, it's an indicator of your ability to be able to pay back new debt. Now, one thing that's really important when we talk about credit reports and credit scores is that in no way does it account for all the variables of life. Okay, so somebody can have an outstanding credit score or a credit score that needs some opportunity, but it does not show all of the variables in someone's life that could impact that score. This is why it's so important that you develop a strong relationship with your financial institution so they have the entire picture, and you work with them to find products and services that suit you and your financial needs. With that said, those with a higher credit score generally get better terms on any loans or any debt that they take on, and those with a lower credit score may still be able to purchase whatever they're looking to purchase, but often that means that they're paying a slightly higher interest rate. Not only that, there are many institutions that look at your credit score that are not part of the financial industry. Some employers will pull your credit score, some landlords will pull your credit score, utilities often do. So again, the purpose of this presentation is give you the tools to help you increase your credit score as easily as possible and to avoid pitfalls that might bring your credit score down. Now, there are several different scoring models that are available, but in general, what you're going to find with most financial institutions is them using the FICO model. Now, a FICO score accounts for different variables in your payment history and in your credit history. Now, in the FICO score, the largest impact to your overall credit score is your payment history. That accounts for approximately 35% of your score. So what that means is that it is critical and vitally important that you make that monthly payment every single month. I always recommend pay more if you can whenever you are in debt, but at the very least make the minimum payment every single month. The next largest, which accounts for approximately 30%, is the amount that you actually owe. And in general, it's not recommended to use more than 30% of your available credit. Where we see this happening, where people generally go over that 30%, is in credit cards. And we strongly urge that you keep your credit card debt as low as possible. And again, if you focus on the things that you actually need as opposed to the thing that you want, it helps to be able to do that. Between those two variables, that is 65% of your credit score. The other three variables are how long you've had your credit, that accounts for 15%, new credit accounts for 10%, and credit mix accounts for another 10%. And what credit mix is the diversity of credit accounts that you have, let's say a credit card, an installment loan, a mortgage, and that just helps give an indicator of your ability to manage your personal finances. So accounting for those variables, the FICO method will give you a score. And the score range goes from poor to exceptional. So I'm going to start at the top. An exceptional score is a range from 800 to 850. A very good score is from 740 to 799. In general, if you have an exceptional score or a very good score, that means that you are going to get the best possible terms for any loan or credit that you want to acquire. Just below very good is good. A good score is a score between 670 and 739. Now, most folks generally fall within the good to very good range. Now, what that means is that when you do apply for a loan, that you're going to get good terms. And when I refer to good terms, that generally means that the interest rate on that loan is going to be one that is a little bit lower interest rate. The other two ratings that you can get with the FICO score is a fair rating that is 580 to 669, or poor, and that's anything below 580. Now, if you do fall into those ranges, as I mentioned previously, you might still be able to take out a loan, you might still be able to get the credit that you're looking for, but that generally means you're going to pay slightly higher interest rates. Now that we've discussed credit reports, credit bureaus, and FICO scores, the next thing I want to talk about is if you do find that you are in the fair or poor range, or if you just want to increase your credit score, I want to talk about some of the ways you can do that. The first recommendation we've already discussed, and that is pulling your credit report at least once a year. The next thing is, after you've looked at your credit report, make sure that you look for errors and dispute those errors as you see them. You can dispute those directly from annualcreditreport.com. The next is to make sure you pay all of your bills as agreed. As I've already mentioned, you always want to pay a little bit more if you can, but if you can't, make sure you pay at least the minimum monthly payment. You always want to make sure that you're not using all of your credit available. There are lots of ways to improve your credit. One of them is to keep your accounts open if they have a good payment history and even if you're not using them. I'm going to talk about different tools further in the presentation that will also help you improve and repair your credit. A couple of other options to repair or build your credit are to look for low-risk products. At Tongass Federal Credit Union, we offer secured credit cards and secured loans. Now, both of those products are very low risk and they will help you build and repair your credit. If you have questions about those, I would recommend stopping by one of our branches. We'll all be very happy to go over those with you. And they are not only used for somebody that's repairing their credit, but as I mentioned, younger people often do not have a lot of credit to work with. This is great for our younger folks as well. Another thing you can do to start repairing your credit is to start reducing your debt. As I mentioned earlier, you don't want to use more than 30% of your available credit. And as I also mentioned, that it's usually credit cards that get folks into trouble in that area. There are several debt reduction techniques available that I'm going to cover with you, starting with the snowball method. Now, the snowball method is a method where you take all of your debts and you list them from largest to smallest. And once you have them listed, what you do is you focus extra payments on your smallest balances. Make sure that you pay at least the minimum payment on the other balances, but focus any extra payments that you have on getting that smallest balance paid off. Now, what's really nice about that method is that there's quite a bit of satisfaction in getting those debts paid off. So you get to feel that a little bit sooner by using this method. Now, what you're going to want to also do though is make sure that once you get that smallest debt paid off, whatever money you had budgeted for that smallest debt, you then move it to the next smallest. You've already budgeted that money, you've already made sure that it's available, so keep the momentum going and move it to the next smallest debt and then to the next smallest. And that's one way to start paying off your debt and reducing your overall debt. Now, I have used the snowball method in my life to pay off those debts. And as I mentioned, it does feel good to start getting those paid off in that way. But there's another technique available called the avalanche method, and this one's very similar. And this one is a really beneficial method when you do have debts that have a higher interest rate than others. With this method, what you do is similarly, you list all of your debts, but this time by interest rate. And what you do in this method is you focus all of your payments, any extra payments that you can, in the debt with the highest interest rate. And what that does is that pays off that highest interest rate debt faster than the other debts. And the reason why you do this is because interest rates compound upon itself. So the longer that high interest rate debt carries, that means that it becomes a little bit harder to pay off. You still want to make sure you make at least the minimum payments on the other debts, but you want to get that higher interest rate debt paid off first, and then you use the same method as we did with the snowball method. You pay off that higher interest rate debt, then you move to the next highest interest rate, and you move on down until you get them all paid off. Now, what's really important with either of these methods is if the intent is to get yourself out of debt or to reduce your debt, is you have to stop using debt. So you have to make that commitment that you're going to stop using your credit until you can get yourself out of debt. And again, it's going to be real critical that you focus on your needs, not your wants, which will help you get your debts paid off even faster. The last method, and this one requires quite a bit more research, would be a debt consolidation. There's a couple of different mechanisms to consolidate your debt. You can use an existing line of credit in some way, whether it be a credit card or a home equity line of credit, and consolidate all of your debts onto that one. Now, when you do this, you have to make sure that you account for balance transfer fees, interest rates, and make sure that because you'll be adding a new payment, make sure that that payment still meets your household financial needs. Another way is to take on new debt. I'm sure you have all seen those credit card offers that offer balance transfers. This can be a little bit riskier, so again, research is required. Make sure you make the best decision for you, but ultimately it's the same technique. You can open up a new line of credit, consolidate all of your debt on a lower interest rate, and focus your payments on those. Now again, this is not something that you can generally just jump right into without taking a look at what you owe, where that debt is going to go, what your monthly payments are going to be, and the interest rates that are going to impact all of that. But it is an option available. I just recommend that you do your research, make sure that it makes sense for you and your household. I hope this was helpful. As I mentioned, by using these techniques and understanding how credit works, how debt works, and using them as a tool, it can not only help your personal finances, but as I mentioned, it can also help you get lending for you to open up a new business. When somebody wants to open up a new business, we do not have historical business information to base our decisions on. So what we use is your personal information, your personal finances, your credit score, and any assets that you might have to help us secure a new loan. So by using these techniques, they will not only help you in your household, but will help you get the best possible terms for any new loans or any new credit that you want to acquire, and will help you get the best possible terms for even business loans if you do want to open up a new business. Now, there are several options available through both Tongass Federal Credit Union and Spruce Root to help folks open up new businesses and get the financing that they need. Particularly with Spruce Root, that there are a variety of workshops available to small business owners, in addition to some lending options that are available. With Tongass Federal Credit Union, we also offer educational workshops like this one and other business lending options available. So if you would like more information on the products or services that either organization can assist you with, or if you'd like to just speak with me, you can contact Spruce Root at spruceroot.org, Tongass Federal Credit Union at tongassfcu.com, or you're welcome to email me directly at gechohawk at tongassfcu.com. That's gechohawk at tongassfcu.com. And I'll be happy to answer any questions that you have or point you in the right direction if you were looking at lending or one of the available workshops that we offer. Thank you.